He gave her everything, love, loyalty, his very soul. But when his wife coldly said, "My body, my rules. I don't owe you anything," something inside him shattered. Betrayal has a cost, and she's about to find out just how high it can be. But what starts as revenge soon spirals into something far darker. Because once you awaken the monster within, there's no turning back. I used to believe that love was unshakable, that trust was a fortress built over time. When I married Evelyn 7 years ago, I vowed to protect that fortress. I wasn't perfect, but I was a man who gave everything to his marriage. I worked long hours to keep her comfortable, to provide the life she wanted. But love isn't just about sacrifice, it's about being seen. And somewhere along the way, Evelyn stopped seeing me. At first, it was subtle. The way she didn't look up when I walked in. The way her goodnight kisses faded into nothing. Then, it became obvious. The conversations we used to have were replaced by silence, her laughter reserved for the glow of her phone screen. I told myself it was stress, that she was tired. But deep down, I knew better. When a woman loves you, she makes time. When she doesn't, she makes excuses. One Friday, I decided to remind her who we were. I left work early, cooked her favorite meal, lit candles like I used to. The anticipation was like a blade against my throat. I wanted her to see me again. She walked in at 7 p.m., tossed her bag aside, and barely acknowledged me. "Hey," I greeted, hopeful. "Hey," she muttered. Her eyes flicked to the dinner table, to the meal I had poured my soul into. She didn't smile. She didn't touch me. "I already ate," she said. My stomach twisted. "You already ate?" "Yeah, grab something with the girls after work." She kicked off her heels and sank onto the couch, her attention already buried in her phone. I stood there, a fool, the weight of my effort crushing me. I wanted her to feel something, anything, but she didn't even notice my silence. I sat across from her, staring, waiting. My pulse was a hammer in my ears. She never looked up. Finally, I spoke. "Evelyn." A sigh. Annoyance. "What? Are we okay?" She rolled her eyes. "God, why do you keep asking that?" "Because you don't even look at me anymore." She scoffed. "I'm just tired, Damien. Not everything is a problem." But it was. Because exhaustion doesn't make you indifferent. Love doesn't disappear because of a bad day. I forced myself to breathe. I had to be careful. I was standing on the edge of something dark, something irreversible. For weeks, I tried to fight for us. I took her out, touched her gently, tried to remind her what we had. But I was a man trying to breathe life into a corpse. Then, one night, I saw it for what it was. She was curled up on the couch, staring at her screen. I was nothing but a shadow in our own home. I sat beside her. "We need to talk." She didn't even flinch. "About what?" "This distance between us." Another sigh. A slow, tired blink. I gritted my teeth. "Evelyn, I want my wife back." She laughed. Cold. Dismissive. "I haven't gone anywhere." "Yes, you have." My voice was sharp now. "You've been gone for months." She shook her head. "I told you, I'm tired." I clenched my fists. "You're always tired." She shot me a glare. "Oh, so now you know how it feels." My body tensed. I inhaled sharply, forcing down the rage. Then she said it. The words that killed everything. "What I do with my body is none of your business." The world went silent. I felt my heartbeat slow, my vision sharpen. I had begged for her love, and she had thrown it at my feet like trash. For the first time, I felt something dangerous bloom inside me. And I knew, in that moment, that something was about to change. Her words echoed in my skull, sharp as a blade pressed against my throat. "What I do with my body is none of your business." I stared at her, at the woman I had sacrificed for, the woman I had built a life around. And all I saw was a stranger. A cold, detached stranger who no longer cared if I was beside her or 6 feet underground. The air between us crackled with something dark. My hands curled into fists, the veins in my arms tightening. I had given Evelyn everything, and she had discarded me like yesterday's trash. I forced myself to stand. "I hear you," I said, my voice eerily calm. She scoffed, turning back to her phone. "Good. Maybe now you'll stop being so damn dramatic." Something inside me snapped. In one swift motion, I grabbed the phone from her hand and hurled it against the wall. The glass shattered, pieces scattering like fallen stars. Evelyn jumped, eyes wide, lips parting in shock. "Damien." But I wasn't listening. My pulse roared in my ears. Months, no years, of neglect, of pain, of being cast aside had built up inside me like a volcano, and now it erupted. I loomed over her, my voice dropping to something dark. I have bled for this marriage. I have fought for you. And all I asked for, all I fucking wanted, was for you to see me. She pressed herself against the couch, fear flickering in her gaze. Finally, she felt something. You're crazy, she whispered. I let out a humorless laugh. No, I've just woken up. I grabbed her wrist, not tightly enough to hurt her, but enough to make her understand. Her pulse fluttered beneath my fingers. You want freedom? I murmured. Fine. I let go, stepping back, watching her rub her wrist. Without another word, I grabbed my jacket and walked to the door. She sat frozen, staring at the broken phone, at the pieces of our marriage scattered across the floor. She expected me to turn around, to apologize, to stay, but I didn't. I opened the door and walked out, slamming it behind me. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my car, knuckles white against the steering wheel, my mind a storm of chaos. I should have seen this coming. I should have known. Evelyn had checked out of our marriage long ago. She had just been waiting for me to realize it. I gritted my teeth. She thinks she can just push me aside? Like I'm nothing? No, that wasn't how this was going to end. I reached for my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in years. It rang twice before a voice answered. Well, the man chuckled. Didn't think I'd be hearing from you again, Damien. I exhaled slowly. I need a favor. A pause. Then, a knowing laugh. Tell me who needs to suffer. My grip on the phone tightened. My wife. The night air was thick with the scent of gasoline and asphalt as I parked my car outside a rundown bar on the city's edge. It was the kind of place where men disappeared, where whispers carried more weight than the law. Inside, the air was laced with cigarette smoke and sweat. Shadows moved between the neon lights, faces half hidden in the dim glow. And in the farthest corner, nursing a glass of whiskey, was the man I had called. Nathan Grim Carver. We had history, dark, violent history. He owed me. And tonight, I was here to collect. He glanced up as I approached, his sharp eyes scanning me before a grin spread across his scarred face. Well, he drawled, tipping his glass. Didn't think you'd ever come crawling back, Damien. I pulled out a chair, the legs scraping against the floor. I'm not here to talk about the past. Grim took a slow sip of his drink. Then let's talk about the future. He leaned forward, his voice low. Tell me, what's the job? I exhaled, my hands tightening into fists. Evelyn. Her cold eyes. Her dismissive scoff. The way she had made me feel like nothing. I need someone scared, I said, my voice steady. I need someone to remember what fear tastes like. Grim chuckled. A lesson in suffering. He set down his glass, tapping the rim. Who's the target? I didn't hesitate. My wife. That caught his attention. His grin faltered for just a second before he leaned back, studying me. Interesting, he muttered. Most men just drink themselves into oblivion when their woman fucks them over. You come to me. I met his gaze. I want her to feel what I felt. I want her to break. Grim whistled. You always did have a way with words, Damien. He drummed his fingers against the table. What exactly are we talking? A little scare? Or something more permanent? I swallowed. Permanent. The words sat heavy on my tongue. I could end this. Right now? Evelyn would never laugh at me again. Never brush me aside. But I wasn't ready for that. Not yet. I want her terrified, I said. I want her to know she's not untouchable. Grim grinned. I can work with that. 2 nights later. The plan was simple. Grim and his men would follow Evelyn after work, corner her when she least expected it. A lesson in vulnerability. A reminder that she wasn't in control anymore. I told myself I'd stay away, that I wouldn't watch. But when the time came, I found myself parked down the street, hands gripping the wheel, waiting for the moment everything shifted. And then I saw her. She was leaving a cafe, her phone glued to her hand like always. No doubt texting her friends, living in her little world where I no longer existed. She never saw them coming. Grim moved like a shadow, his men flanking him as they stepped from the alley. Evelyn barely had time to react before she was yanked into the darkness. A muffled scream. A scuffle. The sound of a body hitting the wall. My pulse pounded as I watched from a distance. This is what she deserves. I could see Grim's silhouette, towering over her. His voice was low, but I knew exactly what he was saying. Not so powerful now, are you? Evelyn whimpered. I could see her hands shaking, her body pressed against the wall. For the first time in years, she was scared. Good. Grim leaned in, whispering something against her ear. I saw her flinch, saw the panic in her body language. Then, just as quickly as they came, they disappeared into the night. Evelyn crumpled to the pavement, gasping for breath. I could have driven away. I could have let her sit there, drowning in her fear. But instead, I stepped out of the car. She looked up, eyes wide, desperate for safety. But when she saw me, the color drained from her face. Damien. Her voice was barely a whisper. I crouched in front of her, watching the realization dawn on her face. She knew. She knew. I reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. She flinched. Now you understand, I murmured. Evelyn trembled, her breath uneven. You did this. I tilted my head. What I do with my life is none of your business. Her lip quivered, and for the first time, she felt what it was like to be powerless. Evelyn sat frozen on the pavement, her wide, terrified eyes locked onto mine. I could hear her ragged breaths, the slight tremor in her hands as she clutched her chest like she was trying to hold herself together. Why you did this? She whispered again, barely able to form the words. I crouched lower, my voice quiet. What's wrong, Evelyn? You don't like how it feels. She flinched as if my voice itself had weight, pressing down on her like an unbearable burden. Good. I leaned in closer. You walked through life thinking you were untouchable, that you could say anything, do anything, and there'd be no consequences. But that's not how the world works. Her lip trembled. You're insane. I laughed softly, shaking my head. No, Evelyn. I'm awake. For years, I had been the man who begged, the man who tolerated her coldness, her cruelty, the man who swallowed every ounce of pain she fed him. That man was dead. The woman before me, this fragile, trembling thing, was not my wife. She was prey. I reached out, running my fingers along the tear in her blouse, where Grim must have grabbed her. The fabric was ruined, just like her confidence. She jerked away, but I caught her chin in my hand, forcing her to look at me. You thought I'd always be the man you could ignore, didn't you? My grip tightened. But I want you to remember something, Evelyn. You made me this way. A single tear slipped down her cheek. I wiped it away with my thumb. Then I let go. She gasped like she had been drowning. I stood, staring down at her, watching as she curled in on herself. Stay away from me, she whimpered. I tilted my head, considering the words. Then I smiled. Not yet. And I walked away. 3 days later, Evelyn didn't leave the house. Not for work. Not for groceries. Not even to step outside. She was unraveling. I could feel it. I knew because I was watching. From a distance. From the shadows. I was everywhere she looked, even when I wasn't there. I sent no messages. Made no threats. I didn't have to. The fear lived inside her now. She jumped at every sound, flinched at the sight of passing cars, locked her doors 3 times over. And still, she knew, deep down, locks wouldn't stop me. By the 4th day, she broke. I was waiting, sitting in my car down the street when my phone buzzed. Her name lit up the screen. I let it ring. Once. Twice. Then I answered. Her voice was barely audible. Damien. I stayed silent. I don't know what you want from me, she said, her voice breaking. I can't live like this. I closed my eyes, savoring the moment. Now she knew what it felt like to be the one begging. I took my time responding. I want you to understand. She sniffled, her breath shaky. Understand what? That you were never untouchable, I murmured. A choked sob came through the line. I leaned back against the seat, letting the silence stretch between us. She had 2 choices, run or face what was coming. And something told me she wasn't going anywhere. Not yet, because she was still hoping, desperately, that there was a way out, that there was still a part of me that cared. But she had already killed that man. Now, there was only one thing left to do, and she wouldn't see it coming. Evelyn was unraveling, and I enjoyed every second of it. Her voice had been raw over the phone, thick with desperation. She wasn't the same woman who used to scoff at me, who used to brush me off like I was nothing. No, that woman had been stripped away, piece by piece. Now, all that remained was fear. I could have ended it there. I could have let her live in that fear for the rest of her miserable life. But that wasn't enough. I wanted to see it. I wanted to watch the moment the last shred of her arrogance was crushed beneath my boot. And so, I went to her. Midnight. Her house sat in darkness, but I knew she wasn't sleeping. I had been watching. I had seen the way she flinched at shadows, the way she paced near the windows, eyes darting to every passing car. She was waiting for something to happen, and I wouldn't disappoint her. The back door was easy to unlock. I moved through the house in silence, my steps slow, deliberate. I could hear her breathing before I even saw her. She was in the living room, curled up on the couch, knees tucked to her chest. A knife sat on the coffee table beside her, her only pathetic attempt at protection. I smiled. She thought she was ready. She had no idea. I stepped forward, letting the floor creak beneath my weight. Her head snapped up, and then, for a moment, there was nothing but pure, paralyzing terror in her eyes. She didn't scream. She didn't move. She knew it was over. I took my time, walking around the couch, watching her chest rise and fall in frantic, shallow breaths. Damien, her voice was barely a whisper. I crouched in front of her, tilting my head. You look tired. She shuddered. I reached out, slowly, deliberately, and brushed my fingers along her cheek. She jerked back like my touch burned her. Good. Please, she choked out. I understand. I get it now. I chuckled softly. Do you? She nodded rapidly, tears spilling down her face. I was wrong. I treated you like you didn't matter, but you did. You always did. I should have, her voice broke. I should have been better. I stared at her for a long moment, watching the way her hands shook, the way her body caved inward. I believed her, but it didn't matter. She wanted to fix it now, but I had given her years to fix it. She had wasted them all. I leaned in, lips close to her ear. But I don't care anymore. She let out a sob. And then, in a single swift movement, I grabbed her by the throat and slammed her against the couch. She gasped, hands flying up to claw at my wrist. But she was weak. She was nothing. I held her there, watching as panic flooded her gaze, as she thrashed beneath me, trying, failing, to break free. This was justice. This was balance. She had taken everything from me. And now, I was taking her. Her struggles weakened. The light in her eyes dimmed. And then, I let go. She crumpled forward, coughing, gasping for breath, clutching at her throat. I stood, watching as she sucked in air like a dying thing. She didn't look at me. She couldn't. She knew she was nothing now. I turned away, walking toward the door. Damien. Her voice was hoarse, broken. I paused. She swallowed hard. Are you going to kill me? I didn't answer. Instead, I glanced back, meeting her swollen, tear-streaked gaze. Then I smiled. Already did. And I walked out, leaving her to drown in the ruins of the woman she used to be. And just like that, it was over. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Evelyn would never be the same. She would never forget what it felt like to lose control, to be the one begging. I had finally won. And for the first time in years, I felt alive.